Did you know that for decades, medicine was tested almost exclusively on men? Then, the findings were handed to women as if we were simply smaller versions of men. But we're not, and the results have been devastating. Women experience different symptoms, metabolize drugs differently, and need unique approaches to sleep, fasting, and hormone health. Yet for years, we were left out of the research. Today, I want to show you exactly what happened, why it matters, and how you can start making small but powerful changes in your own health journey. By the end of this episode, you'll know the questions to ask your doctor, the pitfalls to avoid, and a simple plan you can start this week to reclaim your energy and your health. When I first started digging into this topic, one statistic stopped me in my tracks. Women are nearly twice as likely as men to suffer adverse drug reactions. Think about that for a moment. That means when a doctor prescribes the standard dose of a medication, there's a higher chance it's not right for you, simply because the research that informed that prescription may never have included women in the first place. This isn't just about medications. It affects how we sleep, how we eat, how we fast, and how we respond to exercise. Our bodies operate on a rhythm, our circadian cycle, and women's cycles are slightly shorter than men's. That means when the standard advice says we all need to wake up, eat, and go to bed at the same times, those guidelines may actually leave women more tired, more inflamed, and more frustrated. And when it comes to nutrition, especially things like fasting, the gap is even larger. Only about 8% of nutrition trials report sex-specific results. So when you see bold headlines like intermittent fasting works for weight loss, most of those studies didn't separate the men from the women, even though our hormones and our biology respond very differently. So let me set the expectation for this episode. I am not here to give you a medical diagnosis or to tell you to throw away all the research that's out there. What I am here to do is shine a light on the missing context. I want to give you a timeline of when women finally started being included in studies, the biggest examples of where the male default has failed us, and most importantly, some practical adjustments you can make right now. Here's the good news. You don't need a medical degree to advocate for yourself. You don't need to understand every scientific nuance. What you need are the right questions and a simple system. By the end of this conversation, you'll have both. Let's rewind for a moment and really understand how we got here. Because this didn't just happen by accident. There were decades of decisions that led to women being left out of research. In 1977, the FDA issued guidance that women of childbearing potential should be excluded from early-stage clinical trials. At the time, the reasoning sounded protective. Don't risk harming an unborn child. Don't deal with the complexity of women's hormone cycles. But in practice, what it meant was this. A healthy woman in her 20s or 30s could not participate in most early medical research. And so, the data that built the foundation for drug safety, dosing, and even treatment guidelines, it came almost entirely from the male bodies. Now, advocates began pushing back in the 1980s. By 1986, the National Institutes of Health encouraged researchers to include women. But here's the problem. Encouraged doesn't mean required. So guess what? Most studies still didn't do it. By 1990, a government report found that women were still being excluded at alarming rates. And even when women were included, the results were rarely analyzed by sex. Finally, in 1993, a real turning point arrived. Congress passed the NIH Revitalization Act, which required that women and minorities be included in all NIH-funded clinical trials. That was the first true mandate for change. Around the same time, the FDA also began reversing course. They issued guidance encouraging researchers to study gender differences, and in 1994, they created the Office of Women's Health to keep this issue front and center. Then in 1997, another milestone. the FDA required that new drug applications include demographic data by age, sex, and race. For the first time, companies had to show who was in their studies. And yet, even with these changes, progress has been slow. Many of the guidelines and treatment standards we still use today were built before 1993. That means the foundation of modern medicine was laid without women in the picture. And that is why we are still discovering female-specific differences years, sometimes decades, after drugs have been released and widely prescribed. So let's make this plain. For nearly 2 decades, women were systematically excluded. Then for another 2 decades, they were included in numbers, but not always analyzed. And today, we are still catching up to what should have been common sense from the beginning. Men and women are not the same, and our health deserves equal attention. Next, I want to talk about the cost of the male default and what that actually means in your real life. What has it cost women to be studied as if we were men? First, adverse drug reactions. Women experience them at almost double the rate of men. Think about how many times you've taken a medication and felt awful on it, only to be told that's unusual or it's all in your head. Often it's not in your head, it's in the data, or rather, the lack of data. Here's a concrete example. You may have heard of Ambien, a common sleep medication. For years, men and women were prescribed the exact same dose. But later research showed that women metabolize zolpidem, the active ingredient in Ambien, more slowly than men. That means the same dose that put a man to sleep safely was leaving women groggy, impaired, and sometimes even unsafe to drive the next morning. It wasn't until 2013, yes, 2013, that the FDA officially cut the recommended dose for women in half. That's decades of women being over-medicated simply because no one looked closely enough. And it's not just sleep drugs. Look at cardiovascular disease. For years, women were underrepresented in heart research, even though heart disease is the #1 killer of women. As a result, we now know that women often present with different symptoms: jaw pain, nausea, extreme fatigue. Yet the classic male model of crushing chest pain became the gold standard for diagnosis. How many women were sent home from emergency rooms because their symptoms didn't fit the male textbook? Too many. Even in everyday guidance, sleep, nutrition, fasting, exercise, the male default shows up. Circadian research often used male subjects, yet women's circadian cycles are slightly shorter. Nutrition research still rarely analyzes outcomes by sex. And fasting protocols that became popular in the last decade, they were rarely tested with women's unique hormonal environment in mind. The bottom line is this: when women are treated as small men, we lose. We lose safety, we lose accuracy, and sometimes we lose our lives. But here's the empowering piece. Once you know this, you can stop blaming yourself when a standard plan doesn't work for your body. It's not you, it's the research. And that awareness is the first step to reclaiming your health. Let's shift gears now and talk about sleep, because this is one of the clearest areas where the differences between men and women really show up. Most of us have been told that the ideal circadian rhythm is about 24 hours, and that's true. But here's the nuance. In controlled lab studies, researchers found that women's circadian cycles average about 24 hours and 5 minutes. Men's? About 24 hours and 11 minutes. Now you might be thinking, that's only 6 minutes. What's the big deal? But across days and weeks, that difference adds up. It means women's bodies are often primed to wake up and go to bed a little earlier than men's. And when we try to live on a one-size-fits-all schedule, we can feel constantly out of sync. On top of that, women's melatonin secretion, the hormone that signals bedtime, tends to kick in earlier. So while your husband might be happily watching TV until midnight, your body may already be begging for rest by 10:30. Now, what does this mean in practice? First, it means women often do better when they respect their natural rhythm rather than fight against it. Here are 3 quick adjustments. Morning light exposure. Step outside within the first 30 minutes of waking. Even 10 minutes of light tells your body, this is daytime, it's time to be alert. Caffeine cutoff. Many of us know caffeine can interfere with sleep, but women metabolize caffeine differently than men. Moving your last cup of coffee to at least 8 hours before bed, and ideally 10, can make a huge difference. Evening wind down. Because your circadian phase may be earlier, experiment with dimming lights and shutting off screens 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Your body will thank you. And here's something important. If you're finding yourself with a second wind at night, struggling to fall asleep, or crashing on weekends to catch up, that's not just poor willpower, it's biology. Your body is telling you that the standard schedule isn't serving you. So the coaching I want you to take away is this. Your biology is not a character flaw. You don't need to push harder or shame yourself for being tired earlier. You need to align your environment with your body's natural timing. That's when sleep stops being a battle and starts becoming your secret weapon. Next, I want to talk about fasting and time-restricted eating, specifically for women. This was the first place that this difference in science showed up in my own life. For years, my husband and I were doing the 1 meal a day intermittent fasting way of life. If you know that that means I was eating only once a day, and I was eating very healthy. Clean foods, maybe a few more carbs than necessary, but I was puffy, inflamed, and continually gaining weight, despite eating an average of less than 1,000 calories a day. And that included eating out once a week or my glasses of wine in those average calories. If the old calories in, calories out model really worked, I should have been 100 pounds. But I wasn't. I was gaining weight. Hubby could go to 1 meal a day for a week and lose 10 pounds. I could go to 1 meal a day for a week and gain 2 pounds. Here's the reality. Most of the research behind fasting strategies was not designed with women's physiology in mind. In fact, one review found that only 8% of nutrition studies reported sex-specific results. 8%. That means the majority of the headlines you've read about fasting. Fasting boosts metabolism. Fasting reverses insulin resistance, are based on pooled data, often dominated by men. And women's hormones respond differently. In most cases, our hormones go haywire when they think our body is in famine every day. So our metabolism slows down, our body holds on to weight, and everything goes in the opposite direction of what we want it to. So what does this mean for you if you're curious about fasting? It means we need to approach it gently and with flexibility. Here are a few principles I recommend. First, start simple. Instead of jumping into 16-hour fasts, begin with a 12-hour overnight window. Finish dinner at 7 p.m. and break your fast around 7 a.m. This is safe for most women and gives your body a natural rest. Second, cycle-aware fasting. During your luteal phase, the week before your period, your body is already under more stress. This is not the time to push long fasts. Instead, shorten your window and focus on stable meals with plenty of protein and fiber. During the follicular phase, after your period, many women find they tolerate slightly longer fasts better. Third, match fasting to your lifestyle. If you're under heavy stress, training hard, or not sleeping well, fasting can backfire. Your body perceives it as another stressor. In those seasons, keep your windows shorter and focus on nourishment. Let me give you a simple 2-week experiment you can try. Week 1, set a consistent 12-hour eating window. Pair it with 10 minutes of morning light exposure and a short walk after your largest meal. Week 2, if your energy, sleep, and mood are stable, experiment with extending your eating window by an extra hour, so 13 hours, 3 days that week. Keep protein at every meal and see how your body responds. The signs of success? More energy during the day, better sleep at night, fewer late-night cravings, and stable training quality if you're exercising. The signs it's not working: fatigue, disrupted sleep, mood swings, or worsened cycle symptoms. If those show up, shorten the window. Remember, fasting is a tool, not a punishment. And I want to emphasize this. Fasting isn't for everyone. If you are pregnant, breastfeeding, underweight, have a history of eating disorders, or are dealing with uncontrolled thyroid or adrenal issues, fasting should only be done under medical supervision. So the bottom line is this: fasting can be a supportive tool for women, but only when it's flexible, cycle-aware, and adapted to your real life. You're not broken if the one-size-fits-all plans don't work for you. They weren't designed for you in the first place. Let's talk about hormones and where you are in life. Because if there's one thing that separates women's health needs from men's, this is it. Our hormones don't just fluctuate once a day. They shift across the month, across pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause. And each of those stages changes how we sleep, how we eat, how we burn energy, and how we handle stress. Here's what I want you to know. These fluctuations are not a weakness. They're a blueprint. And when you understand them, you can actually align your lifestyle to work with your body instead of against it. Let's break it down. During the luteal phase, the week or so before your period, progesterone rises. Your body temperature may run higher, which can make sleep more restless. You may crave more carbs, and your stress tolerance can dip. This is the week to prioritize earlier dinners, cooler bedroom temperatures, and magnesium-rich foods like leafy greens, nuts, and seeds. During the follicular phase, the week after your period, estrogen starts to rise. Energy often feels higher, workouts feel easier, and you may be more resilient. This is the time to lean into strength training, new projects, and longer work blocks if you can. During perimenopause and menopause, estrogen and progesterone decline, and that can change everything from sleep quality to how you regulate blood sugar. This is when weight training, protein intake, and cooling sleep strategies, like keeping your bedroom between 65 and 68 degrees, become even more important. The key is self-awareness. Instead of fighting your cycle or your life stage, start tracking your patterns. How do you sleep at different points in your cycle? When do cravings hit hardest? When do you feel most productive? This information is gold when you walk into a doctor's office, because you can say, here are the patterns I see in my body. How do we tailor my plan around them? So here's my message. You are not moody, broken, or lazy. You are cyclical. And once you learn your rhythm, you can build your health around it in a way that feels supportive and sustainable. After hearing all of this, you might be feeling frustrated, and I get it. For decades, women were ignored in the data, but here's the good news. Things are changing. In 2016, the NIH introduced what they call sex as a biological variable. This means that in order to get funding for studies, researchers now have to consider sex differences, whether they're studying humans or even animal models. That's a huge shift because it starts correcting the bias from the ground up. Journals are also stepping up. Many now require that researchers not only include women, but also report results by sex. This means when new studies come out, we're starting to see female-specific data right there in the published results. The FDA is pushing too. Drug companies are being asked to show their diversity plans, including how they will recruit women and minorities into trials. And digital health is playing a role as well. With wearables, apps, and cycle tracking tools, we now have mountains of data on women's sleep, cycles, and metabolism that researchers can't ignore. Now, is it perfect? Not yet. Women are still underrepresented in some fields, and too many studies still lump everyone together. But the momentum is in our favor. Every year, we see more studies that specifically look at how women respond differently. And every time we demand better, by asking our doctors, By questioning guidelines, by supporting research that studies women, we accelerate that progress. So I want you to hold on to this. Yes, the history is frustrating, but the future is hopeful. We are moving into an era where women's health is no longer an afterthought, but a focus. And the more we keep asking questions, the faster we'll get there. All right, let's bring this home with the most important part, what you can actually do about all of this starting today. Because yes, the history is frustrating, but awareness without action can leave us stuck. I want you to walk away from this episode with tools in your hand. First, let's talk about questions. When you sit down with your doctor, here are 4 simple questions you can keep in your back pocket. Was this medication or treatment studied in women my age? Do women respond differently to this drug or therapy than men? How should I adapt this plan around my cycle or my sleep schedule? What side effects are more common in women, and how will we monitor for them? These questions are powerful because they shift the conversation. They show your doctor that you're paying attention, and they make sure your care is personalized to your biology. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with this thought. For far too long, women were treated as if we were just smaller men in medical research. That history has cost us accurate diagnoses, safe dosing, and tailored guidance. But knowing this gives us power. We can ask better questions. We can trust our bodies instead of fighting them. And we can begin to shape a future where women's health is not an afterthought, but a priority. Remember, you don't need to do everything at once. Small, consistent steps, tracking your patterns, asking your doctor the right questions, adjusting your sleep or fasting window can lead to incredible results over time. And most importantly, you are not broken. You are resilient. You are cyclical, and you deserve care that reflects your unique biology. Together, we can move past the era of male-only medicine and into a future designed for all of us. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with another woman who deserves to know this truth. Until next time, keep living simpler, healthier, and with confidence in your own body. I'm cheering for you.